She deserves it more, honey, Mom said, not even glancing up from the elaborate spread of gourmet catering she was meticulously arranging on the antique mahogany dining table. The Michelin-starred chef she'd hired hovered nearby, waiting for her approval. Olivia's always been more dedicated to her studies. You've always had other interests. The casual dismissal pierced my heart like a scalpel. My fingers trembled as I stood in my parents' palatial kitchen with its gleaming marble countertops and custom cabinetry, my medical school diploma still fresh in its frame, trying to process the devastating words that hung in the air between us. Mom, we both graduated with honors. We had the exact same GPA, I managed, my voice steadier than the earthquake happening inside me. My hands shook so badly I had to clench them into fists. I don't understand why you and Dad would pay off all of Olivia's loans, but none of mine. Eleanor, my mother sighed, finally looking up at me with that familiar expression of mild disappointment that made my stomach knot painfully. Your sister doesn't have a distinguished mentor like Dr. Thornton taking an interest in her future. You've always had advantages Olivia didn't. A bitter laugh nearly escaped my lips. Dr. Abigail Thornton became my research advisor because I'd earned that position through 80-hour weeks in the university lab, hunched over brain tissue samples while Olivia was skiing in Aspen with our parents. My so-called advantage had been working myself to physical exhaustion, surviving on coffee and determination, while my twin sister received our parents' unwavering emotional and financial support. So I'm being punished for finding my own mentorship opportunities? I asked, struggling to keep the raw hurt from flooding my voice. The injustice of it made my chest physically ache. My father walked in, his tweed jacket and bow tie perfectly coordinated as always. He placed an arm around my mother's shoulders, his professor's posture impeccable. No one's punishing you, Eleanor. We're simply being practical and logical about resource allocation. Your sister needs more help than you do. You've always been more resourceful and independent. Resourceful. The word burned in my mind. It was the same excuse they used to justify never attending my national science competition wins while flying across the country for Olivia's volleyball tournaments. Resourceful. Their clinical explanation for why Olivia got a brand new luxury car for her 21st birthday while I received a $50 university bookstore gift card. Tomorrow was Olivia's debt-free celebration party, my parents' idea of course. They'd invited extended family, her friends, university colleagues, even the dean of our medical school. The elaborate invitations, embossed with gold lettering, read celebrating Olivia's achievement, as if graduating medical school debt-free had been her accomplishment rather than our parents' financial decision. The thought made my throat constrict with indignation. I need to head out, I said finally, gathering my worn messenger bag. Early shift at the hospital research lab tomorrow. The weight of their indifference pressed down on my shoulders like a physical burden. Will you still make it to Olivia's party? Mom asked, concern finally entering her voice, not for me, but for how my absence might affect my sister's special day. The beautiful Cartier watch they'd just presented to Olivia gleamed on the countertop, its box lined with silk. In stark contrast, my graduation gift, a university library card renewal, sat next to it, the disparity so obvious it was almost comical. I'll be there, I promised, though the thought made my stomach twist into painful knots. The dread of facing another public celebration of Olivia threatened to overwhelm me. As I walked to my decade-old car, my phone buzzed with a message from Dr. Thornton, need to speak with you urgently about the Patterson Fellowship. Extraordinary news that will change everything. Can you come to the lab first thing? I stared at the screen, a cold realization washing over me like icy water. My heart pounded against my ribs. My parents' favoritism wasn't just unfair, it was about to become publicly humiliating, and there was nothing I could do to stop the collision of my professional and personal worlds. My twin sister Olivia and I had been on starkly divergent paths since the moment we entered this world. I arrived first, she followed 6 minutes later. According to family lore, I was quiet and observant, my eyes wide and taking in everything, while Olivia announced her arrival with strong, healthy cries that echoed through the delivery room. That difference in our first moments seemed to establish the pattern that would define our lives. Throughout our childhood in the university town of Ann Arbor, Olivia was the outgoing twin, the one who made friends effortlessly and excelled at sports. Her social calendar was always full, her infectious laughter drawing people to her like moths to a flame. I was quieter, more contemplative, spending countless hours in my father's university library, my small fingers tracing star charts and memorizing scientific terms that children my age couldn't pronounce. While our parents attended every one of Olivia's soccer games and dance recitals, my father even rescheduling faculty meetings to be there, my national science competition victories warranted nothing more than a distracted "good job, Eleanor" and a perfunctory pat on the head that left me feeling hollow inside. By high school, the pattern was cemented in place, hardened like concrete around my heart. When we both announced our intentions to pursue medicine, our parents' faces lit up with pride for Olivia. Their eyes sparkled with excitement as they immediately began making calls to their medical school connections. For me, there were concerned conversations held in hushed tones about the workload and whether my sensitive nature could handle the pressure. Medical school isn't just about being academically gifted, Eleanor, my father had warned, adjusting his glasses with that professorial air he always adopted when delivering lectures at home. It's about determination and social adaptability. Olivia has always pushed herself harder in the real world. The painful irony of his words cut deep into my soul. Throughout undergraduate studies at Cornell, I maintained a perfect 4.0 GPA while working weekends at the university research facility to cover my basic expenses. My fingers were constantly stained with chemical reagents, my eyes bloodshot from late nights peering through microscopes. Meanwhile, Olivia struggled desperately with organic chemistry and physics, requiring expensive private tutors that our parents procured without hesitation. When she needed to retake the MCAT, they paid $10,000 for an exclusive prep course at a prestigious coaching center. When I scored in the 99th percentile on my first attempt, a score that placed me among the top medical school applicants in the country, they simply nodded and said, "That's nice, dear," before returning to their dinner conversation about Olivia's latest social connections. Despite the constant ache of inequality that followed me like a shadow, I never truly resented Olivia. She was my sister, my twin, the other half of me, and I loved her with a fierce protectiveness that transcended our circumstances. She didn't create our parents' favoritism, she just benefited from the warmth of their spotlight while I remained in the shadows. Sometimes I caught her watching me with a strange expression, guilt mixed with admiration, when our parents would lavish praise on her mundane achievements while ignoring my exceptional ones. Though she never voiced it directly, those looks told me she understood the imbalance that defined our family dynamic. We both got accepted to the same medical school in Michigan, and for 4 grueling years we studied together, supported each other through exhausting clinical rotations, and celebrated each other's successes in our private moments. I specialized in neurosurgery while Olivia pursued psychiatry. I foolishly thought that perhaps finally our parents would see us as equally accomplished physicians in training. Instead, they found increasingly creative ways to elevate Olivia's achievements while dismissing mine as expected and unremarkable. When I was selected as the only student researcher to present at a prestigious national neurosurgery conference, an honor typically reserved for senior residents, Olivia had coincidentally received a departmental award for community service that same weekend. My hands trembled with excitement as I called home with my news, only to hear my mother's distracted voice. "That's wonderful, Eleanor, but we've already booked our flights to see Olivia receive her award. You understand, don't you? You're always so independent." But everything changed dramatically during our final year, when Dr. Abigail Thornton, a renowned pediatric neurosurgeon with patents on 3 revolutionary surgical techniques, took notice of my research on pediatric traumatic brain injuries. I still remember the day she approached me after a department presentation, her intelligent eyes sparkling with interest as she bombarded me with incisive questions that left my heart racing with intellectual excitement. Under her mentorship, I flourished like a plant finally receiving sunlight after years in the dark. For the first time in my life, I had someone who truly recognized my potential, who pushed me to excel not despite my analytical personality but because of it. "You have a remarkable gift for research, Eleanor," Dr. Thornton told me one evening as we reviewed brain scans together, her hand resting supportively on my shoulder. "You see neurological patterns others miss entirely. That kind of insight can't be taught, it's innate and precious." The warmth that spread through my chest at her words was unlike anything I'd felt before. If only my parents could see me through her eyes, just for a moment. Perhaps then they might recognize the daughter who had been standing before them all along. The morning before Olivia's celebration, I met Dr. Thornton in her research laboratory. The cutting-edge space hummed with the sound of sophisticated neuroimaging equipment, and the walls were lined with digital monitors displaying 3D brain models and neural pathway visualizations. Dr. Thornton was a commanding presence, a striking woman in her early 50s with deep black hair streaked with distinguished silver and penetrating blue eyes that analyzed everything with clinical precision. Her office walls showcased an impressive collection of awards, published medical journals featuring her groundbreaking work, and photographs with neurosurgical pioneers from around the world. "Eleanor, please sit," she said, gesturing to the chair across from her workstation where a holographic brain scan rotated slowly in the air between us. My heart pounded against my ribs as I noticed the intensity in her expression. "I have extraordinary news that's going to change the trajectory of your career." My pulse quickened to a deafening roar in my ears. For weeks, no, months, I'd been anxiously waiting to hear about the Patterson Fellowship at Johns Hopkins. This wasn't just any position, it was the holy grail of neurosurgical research opportunities, the most prestigious fellowship offered to a graduating medical student in the entire country. The competition was brutal, hundreds of brilliant minds vying for a single spot that could define a medical career. "The Patterson Fellowship Committee has reached their decision," Dr. Thornton said, her expression masterfully controlled, giving nothing away. The suspense made my stomach clench painfully. I held my breath, my fingers digging into my palms so hard I could feel my nails leaving marks. "They've selected you," she announced, her professional demeanor breaking into a radiant smile that transformed her entire face. "Congratulations, Dr. Eleanor Mitchell. You're going to Baltimore to revolutionize neurosurgical science." Joy, disbelief, and profound validation crashed over me in overwhelming waves, bringing tears to my eyes. The Patterson Fellowship, the pinnacle achievement that established legends in the field, was mine. My vision blurred as emotions threatened to overwhelm me completely. I don't even know how to process this," I stammered, my voice thick with emotion. "This feels surreal." "You earned this through sheer brilliance and determination," Dr. Thornton said firmly, reaching across to grasp my trembling hands. "Your innovative research on neurovascular regeneration after traumatic brain injury was genuinely groundbreaking. The selection committee was particularly impressed with your dual-approach methodology, combining minimally invasive surgical techniques with targeted pharmacological intervention. Your work could potentially reduce recovery time by 60% in pediatric patients. That's not just impressive, it's life-changing for thousands of children." The fellowship package she slid across the desk was extraordinary: a $175,000 annual stipend, a housing allowance in Baltimore's exclusive Harbor East neighborhood, dedicated research funding, guaranteed publication in the top neurosurgical journals, and most importantly, complete student loan forgiveness. I would be debt-free, just like Olivia, but through my own scientific merit rather than parental favoritism. The thought made my chest swell with a pride I had rarely allowed myself to feel. "There's more we need to discuss," Dr. Thornton continued, her eyes twinkling with something that looked almost mischievous. "I've received an invitation to Olivia's celebration tonight. Your parents extended it as a professional courtesy to faculty members, clearly not realizing the extent of our mentorship relationship." She studied my reaction carefully. "I believe this presents a strategic opportunity to announce your fellowship news publicly, if you're comfortable with that approach." My stomach dropped painfully, acid rising in my throat. "I don't know, Dr. Thornton. It's supposed to be Olivia's night, and my parents will almost certainly interpret this as me deliberately stealing her spotlight." They've always been protective of her moments. Dr. Thornton's expression hardened slightly, her medical gaze dissecting the situation with clinical precision. Eleanor, I've observed your family dynamic carefully over the past 2 years. I've seen your parents at hospital functions, noted how they speak about both you and your sister, analyzed their behavioral patterns. As both a neurosurgeon and someone who's navigated academic politics for decades, I understand your hesitation completely. However, from a psychological standpoint, sometimes recognition needs to be public to be properly acknowledged at all. Private accomplishments are too easily dismissed by those who have established patterns of minimization. She was right, of course. If my parents heard about the fellowship in private, they'd inevitably find a way to diminish it or attribute it to fortunate circumstances rather than my own achievement and intellectual capacity. The uncomfortable truth made my chest ache with familiar pain. Okay, I nodded slowly, feeling something resolute hardening within me. You can announce it. Maybe it's time for some truth. As I left her lab, my phone vibrated with a text message from Olivia. Mom's going absolutely overboard for tonight. It's honestly embarrassing. She's hired a string quartet and invited half the medical school faculty. I wish she'd put this much effort into celebrating both of us graduating with honors. You deserve recognition too. See you there. XO. I stared at the message in stunned confusion, rereading it 3 times. A warm feeling spread through my chest. This was the first time Olivia had ever explicitly acknowledged our parents' blatantly unequal treatment. Had she always seen the disparity but been afraid to mention it? Before I could formulate a response, another text notification appeared, this one from my mother. Don't forget, business formal attire for tonight's celebration, Eleanor. The university president may make an appearance. And please, let your sister have her moment without any distractions. This recognition is very important for her future connections. The dean will be there. The stark contrast between the 2 messages hit me like a physical blow. Perhaps I had been wrong about Olivia all along, maybe she had been silently aware of the imbalance but caught in her own impossible position. And perhaps tonight would finally force to the surface truths my parents had been carefully burying for 27 years of our lives. Olivia's debt-free celebration was being held at Chandler Hall, a historic university building with soaring ceilings and marble columns. My parents had rented the entire grand ballroom, an extravagance that must have cost tens of thousands, especially with the elaborate floral arrangements and ice sculptures that adorned every corner of the space. A string quartet played softly in the background, their melancholy notes somehow perfectly matching my mood. As I stepped through the grand oak doors, my heart sank at the sight of an enormous digital projection spanning the entire wall. Congratulations, Dr. Olivia Mitchell, accompanied by a professional photo montage of my sister's journey through medical school. There was no mention that there were, in fact, 2 Dr. Mitchells graduating with identical GPAs. I smoothed down my simple navy blue dress, purchased on sale last season, and took a deep, steadying breath that did little to calm the storm of emotions raging inside me. Despite Dr. Thornton's planned announcement, I wouldn't let years of accumulated resentment poison my relationship with my twin. The tightness in my chest was almost painful as I forced myself to smile. Eleanor. Olivia spotted me immediately, her face lighting up with genuine joy as she broke away from a circle of admiring relatives to rush toward me. She looked absolutely stunning in a designer silver cocktail dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent, her perfectly styled bob gleaming under the crystal chandeliers while my own longer hair was simply tied back with a clip. "Thank God you're here," she whispered, gripping my hands tightly. "Aunt Patricia has cornered me 5 times already, demanding to know if I've found a suitable doctor husband yet." Her exact words. I'm about to lose my mind. I laughed despite the anxiety churning in my stomach. "What did you tell her this time?" "That I'm currently married to psychiatry, but if she knows any eligible neurosurgeons who don't mind being psychoanalyzed over breakfast, I'm accepting applications." Her eyes sparkled with the humor we'd always shared privately, away from our parents' evaluating gaze. Olivia linked her arm through mine, pulling me close in a conspiratorial manner. Seriously though, Eleanor, this is completely ridiculous and over the top. Mom and Dad invited half the medical school faculty. Dean Richardson is here, and I think that's the university president by the champagne fountain. I feel like I'm on display at some academic exhibition. I scanned the crowded ballroom and indeed spotted the dean in deep conversation with our father, who was gesturing animatedly, his professor's mannerisms on full display. Wow, they really went all out, I murmured, watching waiters in formal attire circulating with trays of champagne and gourmet hors d'oeuvres. Too all out. It's absolutely mortifying, Olivia lowered her voice to a near whisper, her fingers tightening around my arm. And why just for me? We both graduated with honors. We both worked our asses off for years. Your research is actually changing how brain injuries are treated, while I'm just starting out in psychiatry. The knot of tension in my stomach loosened slightly, replaced by a warm feeling of validation. Maybe Olivia had always been more aware of our parents' favoritism than I'd given her credit for. The thought was both comforting and heartbreaking. Eleanor. Olivia. Our mother appeared suddenly before us, champagne flute in one hand and her designer clutch in the other. Her expertly applied makeup couldn't quite hide the calculating look in her eyes. Olivia, darling, the Chens just arrived. You remember Dr. Vanessa Chen, the chief of neurosurgery at University Hospital? She specifically asked to speak with you about your interest in neuropsychiatry. She took Olivia's arm, effectively separating us with surgical precision, then glanced back at me with that familiar dismissive look that made me feel instantly smaller. Eleanor, could you please check if the catering staff has properly arranged the gluten-free section? The university provost's wife is quite particular about her dietary restrictions, and we can't afford any embarrassments tonight. And just like that, I was relegated to catering management while my sister was paraded before hospital administrators and department heads. The familiar pain of exclusion washed over me like a cold wave. Some things truly never changed, no matter what I achieved. I was reluctantly directing waitstaff to the correct table when Dr. Thornton arrived. She looked magnificent in a tailored crimson pantsuit that somehow commanded attention without seeking it, her natural authority causing several faculty members to straighten their posture as she passed. Eleanor, she said warmly, embracing me with genuine affection that made my throat tighten with emotion. You look lovely. Are you mentally prepared for our announcement? I'm not sure, I admitted, feeling my pulse quicken anxiously. The timing feels incredibly complicated. Look at all this. I gestured discreetly at the elaborate celebration surrounding us, the obvious display of parental approval that had never been directed my way. Dr. Thornton surveyed the party with the analytical precision of a neurosurgeon, her sharp eyes taking in every painful detail, the enormous digital displays emblazoned with only Olivia's name, the professionally decorated 5-tier cake featuring Olivia's graduation photo, the elaborate slideshow presentation that showed Olivia prominently in almost every frame while I appeared only occasionally in the background, half hidden and rarely in focus. I see, she said quietly, her voice tinged with a righteous indignation that validated my own feelings. This is significantly more complicated than I initially realized. The disparity is quite blatant. Across the grand ballroom, I watched with a sinking feeling as my parents proudly introduced Olivia to Dr. Vanessa Chen, the renowned chief of neurosurgery at University Hospital, where both Olivia and I had applied for residency positions. My stomach clenched painfully, acid burning my throat. Were they actually trying to secure Olivia a position through personal connections, despite her completely different specialization? Dr. Thornton. My father had spotted her and was now approaching with an exaggerated academic stride, my mother and Olivia in tow. The false warmth in his voice made my skin crawl. What an absolute honor to have someone of your caliber join us this evening. I understand you've done some collaborative work with Eleanor? Some work? Dr. Thornton raised a perfectly arched eyebrow, her voice taking on the crisp tone she typically reserved for challenging incorrect diagnoses. Eleanor has been my primary research partner for the past 2 years. Her groundbreaking contribution to our pediatric traumatic brain injury study was not merely helpful but absolutely instrumental to its unprecedented success. In fact, her innovative methodological approach has changed how we understand neural regeneration pathways. My parents exchanged a quick glance that I couldn't quite interpret, though the momentary flash of discomfort on their faces sent a small thrill through me. "How nice," my mother said vaguely, her smile not reaching her eyes. "Olivia has also been very heavily involved in neurosurgical research recently. In fact, Dr. Chen was just commenting on how extraordinarily impressed she is with Olivia's application to her neurosurgery program." A hot flush of anger surged through my body, my cheeks burning with indignation. Olivia hadn't done any neurosurgical research whatsoever. Her focus was entirely on neuropsychiatry, a completely different medical discipline with minimal surgical components. My parents were blatantly misrepresenting her experience and expertise, potentially at the direct expense of my own hard-earned opportunities. I glanced at Olivia, who looked visibly uncomfortable, her eyes darting away from mine. Dr. Thornton's expression remained professionally pleasant, but I could see the dangerous steel glint in her eyes that her surgical residents had learned to fear. "Is that so? How absolutely fascinating." I was under the distinct impression that Olivia's focus and expertise was specifically on psychiatric applications rather than surgical interventions. The two fields require entirely different skill sets and training approaches, as I'm sure Dr. Chen would agree. An awkward silence fell over our small group, thick with tension you could cut with a scalpel. My fragile trap of hope was closing around me. This announcement was going to make things much worse, not better, potentially creating an unbridgeable chasm in my family. The formal dinner portion of the evening was fully underway, with my parents seated at the elevated head table alongside Olivia, our grandparents, the university president, and Dr. Chen. I was deliberately placed at a secondary table with distant cousins and family friends I barely knew, close enough to hear the conversation at the main table but completely unable to participate in it. The physical manifestation of my lifetime position on the periphery of my family wasn't lost on me. We always knew Olivia was destined for extraordinary greatness, my father was saying loudly to Dr. Chen, his professor's voice carrying clearly across the tables. Even when the girls were small children, Olivia demonstrated remarkable determination and social intelligence. She's always been our ambitious one, the natural leader. Each carefully chosen word felt like a tiny surgical scalpel slicing into my heart. I mechanically pushed the gourmet food around my plate, my appetite completely evaporated. The bitter taste of injustice was the only flavor I could detect. Nearby, Dr. Thornton was seated with other faculty members, occasionally catching my eye with sympathetic but determined glances that somehow bolstered my failing courage. After the elaborate dessert course was served, a custom-created confection featuring decorative elements celebrating Olivia's accomplishments, my father stood and tapped his crystal glass for attention, his academic demeanor in full display. "Thank you all for joining us to celebrate our daughter Olivia's remarkable achievement," he announced, his voice carrying the same authoritative tone he used in lecture halls. As many of you distinguished colleagues know, medical school is an extraordinarily grueling intellectual and emotional journey, and to emerge not only with a degree but completely debt-free is truly something exceptional and worthy of celebration. The assembled crowd applauded politely. I noticed Olivia looking increasingly uncomfortable, her eyes finding mine across the room with an apologetic expression that surprised me. We're tremendously blessed to have been able to fully support Olivia throughout her educational journey, my mother added, standing to join my father, her designer dress catching the light. We always believed in strategically investing in her future because we recognized her potential to make us proud in the medical community. I stared down at my untouched plate, hot tears burning behind my eyes and threatening to spill over. My heart pounded painfully in my chest as I registered their precise wording. They had strategically invested in Olivia, not in both their daughters. The message couldn't possibly be clearer if they had projected it on the wall alongside Olivia's photos. "Actually," Olivia said suddenly, her chair scraping loudly as she stood up with unexpected determination. "I'd like to say something important to everyone here. She looked directly at me across the room, her expression filled with apologetic resolve that took me completely by surprise. My breath caught in my throat. This celebration feels fundamentally incomplete and wrong, Olivia declared, her voice stronger than I'd ever heard it before. Eleanor and I both graduated with identical GPAs. We both worked incredibly hard through years of medical training. And frankly, Eleanor worked significantly harder because she did it without the emotional and financial support system I had. She worked weekends in research labs while I went on family vacations. She found her own mentors while I had doors opened for me. The disparity has been constant and unfair. A stunned hush fell over the crowd like a heavy blanket. Crystal glasses froze midway to lips. My parents looked absolutely thunderstruck, their carefully cultivated social masks slipping to reveal naked panic underneath. Olivia, my mother whispered urgently, tugging at her arm. This is absolutely not the appropriate time for this discussion. It's exactly the right time, Olivia insisted, gently but firmly removing my mother's hand from her sleeve. I cannot in good conscience accept exclusive recognition that deliberately excludes my equally accomplished sister. It's not right, and if we're being completely honest, it never has been. I've benefited from this imbalance my entire life, and I'm not willing to pretend anymore. My throat constricted with powerful emotion, making it difficult to breathe. After all these years of silence and acceptance, Olivia was publicly acknowledging the painful imbalance that had defined our lives. The validation was simultaneously healing and heartbreaking, washing over me in conflicting waves. My father recovered quickly, his academic training in saving face immediately kicking in as he forced a jovial tone that didn't reach his eyes. Of course, naturally we're tremendously proud of both our girls. Eleanor has done exceptionally well too in her own way. But tonight is specifically about celebrating Olivia being debt-free, which is a special financial milestone worth recognizing. A milestone you facilitated through your checkbook, not one I earned through my own merit, Olivia countered, her voice steady but resolute. Her unwavering stance sent a ripple of uncomfortable murmurs through the audience. The tension in the grand ballroom was almost tangible, like electricity before a storm. This was rapidly evolving into precisely the scene my parents had always desperately feared, their carefully curated perfect family image cracking open in front of their esteemed academic peers and colleagues. Dr. Thornton chose that perfect moment to stand, smoothly commanding attention in the way only someone with decades of operating room authority could manage. If I might contribute something significant to this conversation, she said, her authoritative voice cutting clearly through the anxious murmurs like a surgeon's precise incision. This seems like the ideal opportunity to share some extraordinary news about Eleanor that many of you may not yet be aware of. My parents exchanged worried glances filled with dawning realization. Eleanor's groundbreaking research on neurovascular regeneration has earned her the Patterson Fellowship at Johns Hopkins University, Dr. Thornton announced with unmistakable pride. For those not familiar with neurosurgical academia, this is unquestionably the single most prestigious position offered to a graduating medical student in the entire country. Only one student nationwide receives this honor annually. It comes with full loan forgiveness, comprehensive benefits, and a substantial research stipend of $175,000 per year. Gasps and excited murmurs spread through the room like wildfire. Dr. Chen was now looking at me with intense professional interest, reassessing everything she thought she knew. My cousins were whispering excitedly, pointing in my direction with newfound respect. In fact, Dr. Thornton continued with commanding presence. The International Selection Committee specifically cited Eleanor's revolutionary dual-approach methodology, which she developed largely independently while simultaneously balancing a full clinical rotation schedule and weekend laboratory work. Throughout my career, I've had the privilege of mentoring many brilliant and promising physicians, but rarely have I encountered the exceptional level of scientific intuition, dedication, and innovative insight that Eleanor consistently demonstrates in her work with pediatric brain injuries. The room erupted in genuine, enthusiastic applause that seemed to physically wash over me. For me, accomplished medical professionals were turning in their seats to look at me directly, smiling and nodding with newfound professional respect rather than the polite dismissal I'd grown accustomed to receiving. My parents remained frozen at the head table, their expressions a complicated mixture of shock, confusion, and dawning horror as they realized that their carefully constructed narrative about their daughters was publicly unraveling before their most important social connections. Across the room, Olivia was beaming at me with genuine pride, not a hint of jealousy or resentment in her expression, only what looked like long overdue relief. Dr. Thornton wasn't finished. Additionally, I'm pleased to announce that I've personally arranged for the remainder of Eleanor's substantial medical school loans to be fully covered through our department's exclusive merit scholarship fund, a decision that was unanimously approved by the medical board in recognition of her extraordinary contributions to our pediatric neurosurgical research program and her potential to transform the field. The words hung in the air like a declaration of independence. I was debt-free too. And I had earned it through my own merit and intellectual contribution to medical science. After Dr. Thornton's powerful announcement, the celebration transformed dramatically. Faculty members who had previously clustered around Olivia were now eagerly approaching me, asking detailed questions about my neurovascular research methodology and offering heartfelt congratulations on the prestigious fellowship. Several of my clinical supervisors shared enthusiastic stories about my patient care that I hadn't realized they'd even registered, how I'd stayed overnight with a traumatic brain injury case in pediatrics, my innovative approach to pain management for post-operative neurosurgery patients, my ability to explain complex procedures to frightened children. My parents remained frozen at their table, the shock still evident on their faces like masks they couldn't remove. I could see them struggling to process not just the news of my fellowship and loan forgiveness, but the complete dismantling of the carefully crafted narrative they'd constructed about their daughters for nearly 3 decades. The quiet, research-focused, self-sufficient twin they had consistently overlooked and dismissed was now suddenly the center of professional admiration and academic interest. Their expressions carried the dawning horror of people watching their social scaffolding collapse in real time. Olivia made her way through the crowd to my side, 2 champagne flutes in hand, her face glowing with what appeared to be genuine pride and relief. "Congratulations, sis," she said warmly, clinking her glass against mine with affection that made my throat tighten with emotion. "The Patterson Fellowship. That's absolutely incredible and so well-deserved. I'm feeling like the world's worst sister. Why didn't you tell me about this?" "I only found out this morning in Dr. Thornton's lab," I explained, still processing the dramatic shift in the room's energy. "And honestly, I didn't want to overshadow your celebration. It didn't seem fair." Olivia frowned, her expression suddenly serious. This ridiculous, over-the-top spectacle was entirely Mom and Dad's creation, not mine. I actually tried multiple times to tell them it was excessive and fundamentally unfair to you, but you know how they get once they've set their minds on something, especially when it involves their academic reputation. "You really did that?" I asked, genuinely surprised by this revelation that shifted my understanding of our relationship. "Of course I did," Olivia exclaimed, grasping my free hand tightly. "Eleanor, I've always known they treated us differently. It's been painfully obvious since we were children. I didn't know how to challenge it without making the family situation even worse. I was caught in the middle, feeling guilty about benefiting from their favoritism but afraid to rock the boat." Before I could respond to this heartfelt confession, Dr. Vanessa Chin approached us with newfound professional interest in her eyes. "Dr. Mitchell," she said, looking directly at me rather than Olivia for the first time ever. "I was extremely impressed by Dr. Thornton's account of your groundbreaking research. We should seriously discuss whether you'd consider bringing your innovative neurovascular regeneration work to our neurosurgery department instead of Johns Hopkins. We could offer you substantial research funding and surgical privileges." I blinked in surprise at this complete reversal from the woman who had barely acknowledged my existence an hour ago. "That's incredibly flattering, Dr. Chin, but..." "She's already formally accepted the Patterson," Olivia interjected confidently, putting her arm around my shoulders with protective pride. "It's truly a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity that any neurosurgeon would kill for." But you should definitely know that my brilliant sister never does just one revolutionary thing at a time. I'd bet my medical license she'll have another groundbreaking study changing pediatric neurosurgery within months of arriving in Baltimore. Dr. Chen smiled with newfound respect. Well, when you've completed the fellowship, please keep University Hospital in mind. Our neurosurgical department would be extraordinarily fortunate to have someone of your caliber. She nodded to Olivia with professional courtesy. Both of you would be valuable additions in your respective specialties. After she walked away, I turned to Olivia in amazement, my heart swelling with unexpected gratitude. You didn't have to advocate for me like that. I know you were hoping to stay in Detroit for your psychiatry residency. And I still can pursue that path, Olivia said with newfound confidence. But I absolutely refuse to do it by letting Mom and Dad manipulate the situation or by allowing you to miss out on opportunities you've earned through brilliant work. That's not who I want to be anymore, not as a sister, not as a doctor, not as a person. Across the elegant ballroom, I spotted my parents finally rising from their table, moving hesitantly in our direction with forced smiles that didn't reach their eyes. Their progress was painfully slow, repeatedly interrupted by university colleagues and medical professionals who now wanted to talk about me and my research. A completely novel experience that was visibly unsettling for them as they struggled to maintain their social composure. Here they come, Olivia murmured, squeezing my arm supportively. Are you mentally prepared for this conversation? Not even remotely, I admitted, feeling my heart pounding against my ribs. Dr. Thornton certainly shared some extraordinarily impressive information about your research, my father said when they finally reached us, his professor's tone carefully calibrated to sound proud while barely masking his academic discomfort. The Patterson Fellowship, that's quite a prestigious honor in neurosurgical circles. Why didn't you inform us you were even being considered for something of such significance in your field? Would it have genuinely mattered to either of you? I asked quietly, feeling a strange calmness settle over me despite the storm of emotions inside. You've made it abundantly clear where your support and interest have always been focused. My parents exchanged uncomfortable glances, the social facade cracking further. That's simply not a fair assessment, Eleanor, my father began, slipping into his lecture mode that always preceded rationalization. We've consistently supported both of you throughout your lives, my mother interjected quickly, her lawyer's instinct for damage control kicking in. We simply supported you differently because you had different personality types and different needs. Your independence was actually a compliment to your capabilities. Olivia shook her head decisively. Mom, Dad, let's not attempt to rewrite family history tonight in front of colleagues. But we absolutely are going to have a genuine, honest conversation about this pattern very soon, all of us together. She gave me a meaningful look filled with newfound solidarity. No more convenient pretending. No more uncomfortable silences. Dr. Thornton appeared strategically at my elbow, rescuing me from having to formulate a response to years of emotional neglect in a public setting. Eleanor, the dean and the neurology department chair would like a moment of your time. They're discussing featuring your groundbreaking fellowship research in the university's alumni magazine and medical journal. She smiled at my parents, her expression professionally pleasant but her eyes containing the steely determination that had broken through countless barriers in the male-dominated field of neurosurgery. You must be extraordinarily proud to have raised two such remarkably accomplished daughters, though I imagine it's particularly gratifying to see Eleanor's exceptional work finally recognized after all the obstacles she's had to overcome without traditional support systems. The emphasis on overcome was subtle but unmistakable in its implication. My parents had the grace to look visibly embarrassed as several nearby faculty members nodded in agreement with Dr. Thornton's assessment. Well, my mother said weakly, her usual confidence shattered, we've always known Eleanor was special too, in her own way. Too little, too late, and we both knew it. The hollow words echoed between us like a diagnosis that came years after symptoms first appeared. The week following the celebration was utterly transformative in ways I couldn't have imagined. News of my Patterson Fellowship spread like wildfire through the medical community across Michigan, and suddenly doors that had been firmly closed to me swung wide open. Senior professors who had previously given Olivia deadline extensions while denying my identical requests were now emailing with effusive congratulations. Former classmates who had barely acknowledged my existence during 4 grueling years of medical school suddenly claimed close friendship and connection, flooding my inbox with networking requests. My parents, meanwhile, were desperately attempting damage control with the awkward determination of people unaccustomed to having their narrative challenged. They appeared unannounced at my modest apartment the day after the party, arms laden with expensive gift bags and wearing painfully forced smiles that didn't reach their eyes. "We've been doing some serious thinking," my father announced with practiced casualness as he placed an elegant small box on my coffee table, his academic authority noticeably diminished. "With both of you graduating and embarking on your medical careers, we realized we should get you girls something special to mark the occasion. We selected this for you." Inside was a rose gold watch from the same luxury brand they'd given Olivia for her birthday 6 months earlier. The price tag had been removed, but I recognized the distinctive design that had cost several $1,000s. "It's certainly lovely," I said without reaching for it, the distance between us feeling both physical and emotional, though the timing feels significantly delayed. My mother flinched visibly at my words. "Eleanor, we recognize you must feel overlooked sometimes in family dynamics. But please understand that everything we did throughout your lives was because we intuitively knew you could handle challenges independently. Olivia simply needed more structured support and guidance." "That's an extraordinarily convenient narrative you've constructed," I replied, keeping my voice steady despite the emotional tempest inside me. "But it doesn't remotely explain why you attended her minor presentations but deliberately skipped my National Research Award ceremony, why you paid $10,000 for her MCAT prep course but told me to utilize free online resources, why you covered her luxury apartment during medical school but suggested I take out additional high-interest loans for my basic housing. We only have finite financial resources, Eleanor," my father protested, his academic rationalization sounding hollow even to his own ears. "We had to make practical choices based on projected outcomes." "Yes, you certainly did make choices," I agreed, meeting his gaze directly for perhaps the first time in my adult life. "And consistently, without exception, you chose Olivia." My mother's eyes filled with tears, her carefully applied makeup threatening to smudge. "We love you both absolutely equally," she insisted with the desperation of someone watching their carefully constructed reality crumbling. "Perhaps you genuinely believe that," I conceded, feeling strangely liberated by finally speaking these long-buried truths, "but you haven't treated us remotely equally throughout our lives. And expensive watches and belated recognition cannot erase decades of differential treatment." My phone rang with perfect timing, Dr. Thornton calling to discuss the practical details of my upcoming relocation to Baltimore and the research facilities awaiting me. I answered it gratefully, turning away from my parents' stunned expressions. "Yes, I'm absolutely available to discuss the Johns Hopkins housing options and laboratory facilities," I said into the phone, feeling a weight lifting from my shoulders. "In fact, your timing is absolutely perfect in more ways than you realize." 3 weeks later, I stood in my empty apartment, the last boxes packed and neatly labeled for the moving company. The space felt strangely liberating in its emptiness, like a physical manifestation of the emotional baggage I was finally leaving behind. Olivia sat on the windowsill, watching me carefully tape up a final container filled with neuroscience journals and medical references. "I still can't believe you're actually leaving next week," she said, sunlight streaming in behind her, creating a warm glow around her silhouette. "Baltimore feels so far away. Detroit won't feel remotely the same without you here. You'll be so completely immersed in your psychiatry residency you'll barely have time to notice I'm gone," I teased, though there was undeniable truth in my words. My heart squeezed with a mixture of excitement and melancholy. We'd been inseparable throughout medical school, but our paths were finally diverging in meaningful ways, mine leading to the prestigious research laboratories at Johns Hopkins, hers remaining at University Hospital. "I keep thinking about what Mom and Dad did all these years," Olivia said suddenly, her voice taking on a reflective quality I'd rarely heard before. Or more accurately, what they didn't do, I guess. All this time, I genuinely thought I was the fortunate one because they showered me with attention and resources, but they were actually holding me back in profound ways, making me emotionally dependent on their approval and validation instead of developing my own professional identity. I set down my packing tape and sat beside her on the windowsill, our shoulders touching just as they had when we shared secrets as children. You didn't do anything wrong through all of this, Liv. You were just a child navigating the family dynamic they created. I didn't do enough right either, she countered, her expression troubled and introspective. I should have spoken up years ago instead of silently benefiting from the imbalance. She sighed deeply, looking out at the city skyline. They're absolutely devastated now, you know. Mom keeps tearfully calling me, convinced you must hate them completely. Dad's telling everyone in his department about his brilliant neurosurgeon daughter at Johns Hopkins, like he personally mentored your research and funded your education all along. Let them rewrite their narrative if they need to, I said, surprising myself with how genuinely little their revisionist history bothered me now. Their approval or lack thereof no longer defined my sense of self-worth. The realization felt like throwing open windows in a room that had been closed for too long. And it was absolutely true. The constant, gnawing ache of seeking validation from parents who had never truly seen me for who I was had finally subsided like a chronic pain suddenly relieved. Dr. Thornton's authentic mentorship had shown me what genuine professional support actually looked and felt like, challenging me intellectually when I needed pushing beyond my comfort zone, defending me fiercely when I needed protection, providing concrete opportunities rather than empty praise, and always seeing my scientific potential without qualifications or comparisons. So what happens now with our relationship? Olivia asked, vulnerability evident in her voice. With us as sisters, I mean. Without the family dynamic shaping everything. I took her hand in mine, feeling a surge of affection for this person who shared my DNA but was only now becoming truly known to me. We find our own authentic way forward, creating a relationship built on mutual respect rather than the artificial competition they unconsciously fostered between us. I'd like that more than anything, Olivia smiled, squeezing my hand with genuine warmth. Dr. Eleanor Mitchell, Patterson Fellow and groundbreaking neurosurgical researcher. I am so genuinely proud of you, sis. For the first time in years, perhaps the first time in my life, I felt completely at peace within myself. The challenging path ahead was both daunting and exhilarating, but most importantly, it was unquestionably mine to navigate on my own terms, guided by my own intellectual curiosity rather than anyone else's expectations. As the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the empty apartment, I realized I was finally free, not just from student debt, but from the emotional weight of seeking approval from those unable to truly see me. The future stretched before me like an open road, mine to explore without constraints.